Hey, what's going on, YouTube? Thanks again for tuning in here with Dani LaMartina here. She is expert in many areas, but we're going to go deep on all of her many projects she has going on. She's very passionate about helping people through great, high quality educational content. Also, she's a professional athlete as well, so we'll talk a little bit about that and many of her accomplishments. And then, as always, be sure to do the YouTube thing and subscribe, turn on your notifications, like, and definitely comment. So we just can't stress that enough. In the comment section below, be sure to put those questions, comments in there. All of our guests at all times are super engaged and helpful, and they will gladly answer your questions, and we will hunt that information down. Or if there's future episodes you would like us to cover, future content, that is the best type of content that we're really passionate about. I know Dani is. She has several educational platforms as well as I do, as well as we have some kind of shared spaces too that we do a lot of content together. So welcome, Dani. Thank you so much for joining us. We're appreciate you having on.
Yeah, thanks for having me on. I'm really excited to actually have time to sit down and talk with you for a little bit. So I feel like we have a lot of mutual contacts and run in similar circles, so it'd be good to chat for a while.
Yeah, good stuff. Well, I know a pretty good amount, somewhat about you, but for the listeners out there that maybe don't, because maybe they're picking this content up on a different channel, can we start kind of a little bit first with, I'll start with the end. You're an elite power lifter, a physical therapist, IFBB Pro, but can you take us back first, just kind of high level? What got you first started in this whole weightlifting, physique sport, lifting, competitive, all
Yeah.
stuff? Because there's a lot going on there. You have a lot, and you've mastered a lot. So,
It's interesting. People kind of ask me like, what role do you like playing the most between, athlete, coach, physical therapist, bodybuilder, powerlifter, and I'm like, that's really hard to answer because so much of what I do is just take all those things and like draw this massive Venn diagram in my brain and go, how can we make these intermatch? And really I love all of it and they work together really well. But I think, on a very broad scale, so physical therapist by trade, and I think that, I really found lifting as I was in grad school going through some personal stuff, as many of us do. Gym kind of becomes that avenue through which we allow ourselves to be refined, kind of channel ourselves. I didn't want to necessarily go into like sports PT or anything like that. I was working for a regular clinic that you go to if you were just driving down the street. But I was also competing in powerlifting at the time and was getting emails constantly from other powerlifters asking for rehab help because at the time there weren't really other clinicians kind of bridging this gap between these two very different worlds, between the clinical world and the competitive world. And I was reading for a website called EliteFTS at the time. That's usually how people found me. And so I don't want to say my practice, but yeah, kind of my practice was more evolved, more organically out of need and out of necessity than anything else. I've been writing for EliteFTS since 2015. I graduated PT school in 2015. But I started working in PT clinics at 16 and have never really left. So I've seen it done really poorly, and I've seen it done really well. And I think my role in a lot of this is really just to provide a little bit of hope for the athletes who feel like their best might be behind them. And that's really my heart in all of this. I think that in general fitness, whether it's bodybuilding, powerlifting, strongman, CrossFit, they're avenues through which we're sharpened and refined. And I think how we feel physically plays a big role in the way that our internal world kind of operates.
Right. Well, I want to get to like some of the athletes and things that you worked with because it is very unique. I want to make sure the listeners out there understand specifically the massive human beings that you've been able to have an impact on and how, gosh, just complex that must be compared to what you learned in school. But, can you tell us a little bit about, because you kind of brushed over it, but walk us through and I'm going to put you on the spot here, but walk us through we'll start with the first big accomplishments, which is in powerlifting. How did you get into powerlifting? And tell us a little bit about your stats, like weight class and some of those accomplishments that you kind of put your name on the map. Because obviously EliteFTS is a big time powerlifting platform. And you were you know, you've been like you said, you've been writing on there for, what are we on, 7 years now, and very, very well respected by many of the mass monsters that are on Elite FTS. So can you talk a little bit about kind of how you got started, and then walk us through that, a little bit of that powerlifting journey first?
Yeah. All right. Full disclosure. I found powerlifting. I was going through a pretty messy divorce, and I needed someplace to put myself. And I had enough of a clinical background to where I worked in a clinic that was really, really appreciative of some principles at the time were kind of groundbreaking. Maybe not groundbreaking, but they were a very different approach. And so as I was training, I was implementing these principles on myself. And I realized very quickly that when you can maximize these things, you perform really, really well. So I think I may have been maybe the second or maybe the third female in the, at the time, 123-pound class to pull over 400 pounds.
Oh, wow.
Now it seems like everyone does that, right? Like 400 is the new, like 300, 400 is the old 315, basically, or less. And I got distracted there, but basically, so much of where I've gone clinically and my own performance has been because of my clinical background. So I had a really big injury, tore my actual longest tendon off the pelvis, and at the time, again, no one else had really done that except for maybe one other lifter at Elite who lifted gear. So it was an opportunity for me to kind of go, well, now what? And use whatever clinical background I had to start to kind of bridge the gap between rehab and performance. And at the time, I had a physician in the area locally that I really trusted, who understood my sport, who understood what I wanted to do. He kind of looked at me and was like, you know, I think you're going to have to be okay with squatting, you know, 225 floor reps, which for me is, I tore it squatting 315 for 6. So to have to pull back that far, and I think at that time in the 123 class, I was ranked second or third, like in the world, second to like, you know, Steffi Cohen and Emily Hu. So we're like absolute phenoms. So it's not like it was just like a casual thing to me. And this is my entire identity, and completely got lost. And so being able to kind of use that clinical background to, every time I've come across an issue, I've kind of fallen back on that to bring me back to perform what I want to do. So even being able to go from, you know, not being able to train in that capacity to turn to bodybuilding and turn pro very quickly in 2 shows, thanks to Justin's help. And then after that, go back and do another powerlifting meet. And anyone that's listening that follows powerlifting and can know a Wilks number, I think now they're using dots, but I don't know. I was able to put up a Wilks that was at a local meet, third in the country in the 132-pound class after a big weight cut. So being able to kind of use and leverage this clinical background to continue to push the boundaries of performance. I've gotten a lot of actually kind of flack from people, and they're the people who are like, oh, your technique's, you know, not perfect. And I'm like, well, yeah, because I know that the athletes that are coming to me for help, they're not going to be perfect, and they're going to push the envelope in training. And if they don't have a clinician that understands what that looks like, they're not going to be content to hear, sorry, bro, you're going to squat 135 for, you know, 12 weeks. That's not going to fly. So they're going to keep pushing the envelope. And they need someone that understands that and speaks that, walks that. And I think that's really kind of where my niche has fallen into, is just the clinician who's probably, I don't want to say more an athlete first, but pushes the boundaries more than I think a lot of the, like, you know, kind of science nerds might.
Well, I think some people out there too, they may be thinking, she just said like the form's not perfect, right? Or the technique's not perfect. So I just want to show everybody what your approach might be able to deliver. So so that's what is your body weight in this?
On that day, I was thinking about 150, which is, for me, this is the heaviest I've ever been.
Okay, but 415 for 10 in a workout, so it's, you know, that's not too shabby. So I'm sure you.
That was a really good day. Yeah, I want to try and pull 500 this off season, but we'll see. I also have some other goals that I'm pursuing and want to make sure I'm not compromising anything there too. So, I mean, so after I tore the adductor tendon, just being able to get back onto the squat bar and squat a PR that was like I think it was almost a 50-pound PR for me, was a really nice like feather in my cap as a clinician and as an athlete. It's one thing to understand the model that you need to follow to get from point A to point B. It's another to understand the mindset that goes into all the fear avoidance, kinesiophobia, all the things that you think about every time you get back underneath the bar and you kind of wonder, am I going to get up from this? That's a different level of kind of knowing yourself and being willing to tap it into a different gear.
I'm interested to hear more about. I think there's like two things I want to unpack for everybody out there, because the first one that comes to mind for me, I competed in powerlifting in the early 2000s. And when would you say this wasn't the case then, but when would you say it became really popular with women in sports, especially in a lighter weight class? I remember some of the heavier classes. There were one or two, and I mean, it was a pretty big meet, a couple big meets that I went to, and there was only a couple. So I'm just curious too, like, I know you work with a lot of both, well, men, women, all across the board, but I know a few of your female clients have put up some pretty impressive numbers too. Like, when did you first start to see that? Were you like an early, like an innovator with that trend, or was it something you were kind of right when it started to pick up? Like, when did you start to notice that? I just noticed it a lot
I think
probably last
social
handful of years.
I think social media has really perpetuated that. And it's a little bit like when the 4 minute mile was broken for the first time.
Right.
It's kind of thing where you look out from far away and everyone thinks that this thing can never be done. They put this limit on there. But then as soon as we start to actually think that someone might break it, the first person trained to break it. And then after that, I think it was broken like 6 more times within like a year or something like that.
Right.
So I think the more that we start to see people doing things that we thought were impossible, the more our expectations kind of change, and the more our perception of that glass ceiling changes from being glass to a little bit more elastic. So I
Yeah.
think that's been a big part of it.
No,
I think
that's
what we're going to see in the next few years is going to be interesting, in that, especially with females, I think we're starting to see the trends with a lot of men, but I think a lot of women are going to start transitioning out of powerlifting into more bodybuilding or more general health or more, kind of a health phase. Because the stronger we are, every rep you take really does take its toll on the body. And if you lose position,
right.
even just a little bit, there's an increased, obviously, risk reward ratio with that. And we're starting to see a lot of men now transition from powerlifting into more physique athlete. So I feel like I might be a little bit kind of, I don't want to say like ahead on that, but I think that's kind of where we're heading.
Yeah. Yeah, I noticed too, similar to that, it was about 10 years ago, I want to say, 11 years, 12 years ago, I competed in Strongman. And I remember there was no women compet. What's that?
You're doing it all. You really have.
Well, I've been hurt doing it all, but no. So I took a short run at that for a little bit, and uh, the I think it was the smell of tacky and the fact that I couldn't stand up straight. Amber shut that down, and she's like, "All right, you got to make some decisions here. You're either going to do all the rehab you need to do on your off days." And yeah, but it was fun. And but no, I noticed that too. Like a lot of I think from what I witnessed was in the gyms, like the kind of CrossFit, right? Like then they would transition to either powerlifting, and then recently, probably about 4 or 5 years ago, in my area at least, I saw several of the good female lifters were trying strongman because they liked the combination of like the athletic portions of those movements and some of the endurance challenges as well as the heavy lift. So it's just interesting to see, and I think it's really cool to to kind of have like all of the physique sports or performance related, lifting sports kind of being equally represented across the board now. I think it's a pretty cool thing to see. So but then, before we get into kind of the physique training of yourself and people you work with, can you tell me a little bit more about your type of clientele that's a power lifter? Like, what are some of the unique, first and foremost, differences in their frames and the kind of volume or weight they're lifting, and then maybe we can get into a little more specifics as far as what you see and things of that nature.
This is it's interesting because I'm trying to think of how to approach this. I think what I do is very different from what a lot of people would expect in terms of coaching and the clinical aspect, and how we approach handling those issues at different periods of the year is very different. A powerlifter who's coming into a meet feeling stiff, I'm not going to want to open up a bunch of their mobility. Like, that stiffness is acquired, and they need that as they're getting ready for maximum effort weights. Compared to a bodybuilder where I worked on Martin quite a bit with some dry needling right before the Arnold UK this year, and it was like, let's get things as open as we possibly can. help me understand the question a little better. I'm sorry, my brain is
Yeah, no,
all over the place.
I
So
just
help me
think, I
understand
think,
on this.
yeah, no, well, and just to kind of narrow it, right? Like I went to a few physical therapists and it was more the approach of like, why are you lifting that much? You're like, don't do that. And then there was one in particular in my area that was an Olympic lifter, and like, this kind of sounds funny, but as soon as I dropped my pants, because they're looking at the knee, like I had knee issues, they're like, oh, I know why. Like you are like ridiculously quad dominant, and they were just like that. We're able to like start speaking my language as far as how I should set up my splits and the different changes. It actually changed the way I trained for the rest of time, because I always like tried to focus on like hamstrings and glutes and stuff like that, but like I completely changed it. It was like just genetically my quads just responded well. Like when I used to squat, I was like up on my toes and just it was all quad. I mean, it was just you know
Yeah,
um
yeah.
but it was just so imbalanced, even though I wouldn't say I had like small hamstrings, just my quads are so overpowering. So I switched my training for gosh, last 10 years and haven't had an issue since. And I still do a lot of like glute and hamstring work, and I think a lot of guys actually could learn from women that are doing the amount of volume they're doing in the gym on that. It's like guys, it's like flat behinds and tight hips and back problems. It's like, anyways, I went off on a tangent, but that's essentially
No,
what
no,
I
no,
meant
this is
with.
so good because I have a whole bunch of questions for you, and I think we're gonna get some really cool dialogue. So, what was like the biggest thing that you changed in your training that has basically brought you from point A to point B in terms of having pain to be trained, much better? Like, what's been the biggest change?
There's probably two or three. I mean, one of them, yeah, none of them are more than the other, but I will say like one thing I started to do was like stimulate my hamstrings and glutes before doing any kind of movements. So I would start like basic like that's the easiest way, like stimulate my hamstrings and glutes. Maybe it was like a movement or two before I would do anything else, where before it was like we're stretching a little bit, then we're going to go hammer squats, right? Like no, now it's a build up, like almost borderline pre-fatigue, but really not, just like really getting a lot of blood in there and stimulating it. And then believe it or not too, like stuff that was more functional in nature to get my hamstrings were already strong enough, but functionally getting them to work. So doing like slow elevated, as I'm saying, I still need to do this more, but like Bosu ball or stability ball type like leg curls, but very slow and controlled. And then I'm drawing a blank of what it's called, but I would call it like a reverse hip thruster without weight as a warm up, like where my heels are up on a platform and my
Yeah, like
lower
an
back's on
elevator.
the ground, and I'm just driving my hips straight up, like driving the heel down. That force is causing the hamstring to contract, holding it, slowly letting it down. Literally just doing that, um, you know, 12 reps, just kind of 3 sets to kind of get stimulation in that area. So that was a big one. And then mobility, like just being aware of like my piriformis is like someone poured cement in it. So it's like, foam rolling that, doing some activation work, and then go do those lifts. And it just helped those are two big things. And then the other one was actually having a dedicated like hamstring glute day. And then my quad dominant day still is like more of like I would call it a typical leg day, like my old school leg day. It really isn't. I mean, it is, I do extensions and like a squat. That's what I would call a quad dominant. Now, part of that might be genetics, is my quads, like I said, just balloon up pretty easy. But I would say those three things. I'm sure there's more that I could be doing or have done, but I think those are kind of some of the main things that started to help. I still do have, from sitting too much, oddly enough, as I'm sitting, as I'm talking, I do still need to spend more time on mobility before doing mainly like squat type movements, anything with a loaded spine. Like I realized, because I think people mistaken it with like you're getting old, but really what happened was as I progressed in my career, I did more sitting and office work and more. So it wasn't really like an age thing or a strength or weakness thing. It was the shortening of the muscles from sitting for long periods of time. And so that's what affected that, the lower back. And so I'm sure I'll be hitting you up for a program soon. I need to. I've been saying that for a year. So yeah, I would say those things.
It's really cool. I asked that question because I thought I figured. I mean, you're a smart guy, and if you're in the hands of people who are like, "Hey, here's what's going on," it's pretty easy to make the adjustments once you see what's happening. And you're hitting on the things I usually start with people, especially if they're people who have long training histories. Looking at recalibrating in terms of, I'm gonna back up even a little further. There's a lot of talk on the internet about like proprioception, whether or not it's important to like feel a muscle working, right? It's one of the age old like black or white camps, like really dichotomizing concepts within any rehab or coaching or, whatever setting. And I think that you're hitting on a component that's really, really important in all of the athletes that I work with, whether they're powerlifters, bodybuilders, strongman, or if there's someone who, like I have a couple of people who have been referred to me who just had kids and they want to get back to feeling good. Yeah. And as much as the idea of feeling a muscle isn't necessarily required to get the muscle working, we know that in the somatosensory cortex, if there's not a whole lot going on in that portion of the somatosensory cortex, you're probably not going to get the thing off. And we also know that our brain is calibrated to often call on the muscles it's good to talking to. So I use the analogy often where, if you go to a room, you can probably pick up on an Amber's voice like immediately. Even if there are a whole bunch of other people talking, our neuromuscular system is so much the same way, to where it's really good at calling on the people it's good at communicating with. It's good at calling on the muscles that it has talked to often. And so even just recalibrating some of the who are we good at talking to even acutely right now can do a lot with kind of recalibrating the system as a whole, for lack of a better word.
Yeah, no, that's great. No, go ahead.
No. Like I always love talking to people about how they've gone about fixing things, because I'm fascinated at the consistency. And I think especially when we're in an age when social media can have a lot of really good, but also a lot of misinformation, the more consistencies we see, I think it's really important to kind of highlight those.
Yeah, I actually want to get your opinion on something too, because there was this is a little outdated. So I learned this a while ago, and I'm sure there's some value there, but how to unpack it, you could definitely do it better than I could. But we used to throw this term around, like I went through back in the day, National Academy of Sports Medicine. They had like a performance enhancement, corrective exercise, and like a CPT model. And they talked a lot about, like, they called it neuromuscular efficiency. It was like your ability for your brain essentially to send a signal to the muscle fiber to react, right? And I'm sure there's more complex way of explaining that. Was like the basic way. But the one thing that, like, I remember someone, like, the term activation, like a friend of mine uses that a lot. So he would even like take literally and again, he's a little out there, so this might not be accurate. This might be his own thing, but maybe this is applicable to like a deactivated or like a not awake muscle, right? Because it's just so underactive and so shortened. But almost like literally like a foam roller, rolling just for a couple seconds, like on your stomach or on your quad or your whatever that area that's deactivated before you go do a movement, because it would push against that force, which would cause it to kind of wake up or stimulate a little bit, kind of going along with what you said about feeling it. And then if I went to do the set, I would just feel the muscle so much more, if that makes sense. So there was some form of like an activation protocol before doing it. And I found in some people, again, this is my very like 10,000 foot view understanding of biomechanics, so it's nowhere near a PhD, but the glute was a big one for me. So a lot of like knee and lower back pain, like my understanding, and correct me if I'm wording it wrong, but at 90 degrees of the knee, this is again 20 years ago, I'm trying to remember this, but the glute is the primary stabilizer of the knee joint. If roughly some portion of the glute stabilizes the knee or somehow, or how does that work? You can walk me through it. But I would try to get their glute to activate before doing some kind of knee flexion and extension, I guess, some kind of loaded, like, leg movement, and that seemed to drastically decrease their pain in that movement pattern. I don't know. So I know I said a lot there that's like 40% accurate because I'm going off of 20 years ago, but help me out, explain it back.
They're really, really good things. You said so many things. I should have had a little time to write stuff down as you were talking, because I'm just sitting here going, yes, these are the conversations that need to be had amongst coaches, amongst clients, amongst athletes. Like, these conversations have to be had, because at the end of the day, we can think we know what's going on, but the science is always going to change, right? Mm-hmm. One thing that we do know for sure is that whatever afferent information approaches the brain is going to dictate the efferent output. And so whether or not the mechanism of, why the glute turned on a little bit better, for lack of a better word, I hope, semantics police don't come and hang me for that, but why the glute turned on better, maybe it's because we got some input somewhere, who knows? But you're asking the right questions in terms of why is that? Why is that muscle not responding as quickly? Why is it not shouldering as much of the load as it needs to be? I think what's really interesting, and I wish I had this on video, is if you can imagine your body having a breaker box where you have all these switches for all the muscles that are on or off, but instead of an on-off, you had a dimmer switch. I can literally take someone on my table and test them, like do muscle testing. Are you familiar with MAT?
Yep. Yeah, absolutely.
Okay. So my clinical mentor, I should talk my clinical road and why I'm so opinionated on these things. My clinical mentor took MAT and he kind of mentioned me in it. So I have not taken it. I will not say I'm MAT certified. But I can go and take someone and MAT test them. And whatever they're like shut down and or inhibited, and the MAT protocol is basically like, you rub just the right way, get someone on the foam roller just the right way, and look, magically things start to fire again. I can change all those MAT tests by talking to them the wrong way, by turning on the wrong music, by putting them in the wrong shoe, by flicking an eyebrow. I mean, how quickly and how sensitive or unsensitive, depending on who you are, the nervous system is with regards to reactivity is mind-blowing. And it's always really cool to me because I've had some really, really big athletes on my table. My husband's, pushing 300 pounds now. And you would think that if I go to muscle test him, there's no way I should be able to swing the playground. But depending on our conversations right before he gets on the table, how I say something, how he talks to me, I already know how he's going to test. And the output that our nervous system gives us is so much a function of, again, the input that we're given either from the external world via all the sensory stuff or our internal environment. I don't mean to go like total neuro nerd because I'm really a meathead at heart, but I have learned so much that if I want my meathead self to progress the way that she wants to, I need to appreciate the neuro nerd part of this. So I'll go, and I'm really well trained in a school of thought called PRI, or Postural Restoration Institute, which is very much talks a lot about how the human body is biased towards any symmetry. We're not put together symmetrically. The heart on one side of our diaphragm and the liver below it, they're on opposite sides in terms of above and below. Our right hemidiaphragm attaches further down on the lumbar spine. There's different connections to the psoas and the QL. Our brain has a little bit of a bias in terms of a right-sided spherical bias. And we fall into these kind of predictable patterns of asymmetry, and there are a lot of layers to that. The corrective exercises within that school of thought are heavily based on neural input and on respiration, because again, one of the biggest parts of our asymmetry is our left and right hemidiaphragms are not the same. We don't think about it. Like if you actually look at the human body externally, we look symmetrical. And as soon as you peel that off and you look at a picture on the internet, you assume left-right symmetry, but it's not. Right. Our liver actually weighs 3 times as much as our heart does. And so we have that bias already. Anyway, I'm getting lost in this rabbit hole because obviously I love talking about this stuff, but I can go and change someone's MAT testing using a PRI-based exercise, which is again heavily focused on sensory reference centers, respiration, and reciprocal inhibition. Reciprocal inhibition is just a PNF, or neural in general. So I think that it's really, really cool because there's so many layers that, truly like Dunning-Kruger effect, right? There's so many layers that you can get as complicated or as simple as you want. I have some really, really complex people on my roster right now, and a lot of what I'm having them do is just kind of sense different portions of their feet on different portions of their lip. I want them to actually feel their heel on the loading pattern of a movement, because that's kind of our stance phase of gait. I want them to feel more front half of their foot on their concentric, because that's more representative of the pulse state of gait. Am I also looking at what's happening with their pelvic inlet outlet, how their mechanics are affecting through their feet and knees? Yeah, of course, but I'm not going to have an athlete think about all those things if they're loading 7 plates on a hack.
Right. So do you have, I'm curious too, I'm assuming the way you're describing it, do you have clients also send videos of their movement patterns to you? Of them doing movement and stuff? Yeah, quite a bit.
Yeah, I should show you a video or some sort of representation. Most of what I do is, the pain point for a lot of athletes in any sport is there's no one that closes the gap from this clinical world of 3x10 with a TheraBand, like,
right,
sorry, to someone that wants to get back to pulling 415 for 10 on a training day. That's me.
Right.
And so a lot of what I do is use training as the rehab process in and of itself. And I incorporate a lot of neuro-based concepts, all tissue-based concepts, histology, a lot of postural neurological stuff. So when they're working with me, the more video they send, the more they tell me, the better. There's really nothing anyone tells me that freaks me out. I'm so afraid of what someone is afraid to tell me, because that thing might be the most important thing.
No, and I recall, again, it's this is like undergrad and like your general health certifications and stuff, but I recall assessing movement patterns, and right away you could see something that, wasn't firing, wasn't recruiting right, or whatever the case was. Like, you can instantly see, if you just watch someone's joints, you could see something cave, something pull forward, something round, and you're just like, oh, do you normally have this pain, this pain, this pain? And we used to kind of do it on the floor a lot. So when I first started as a trainer, we would just go out and do like some PNF, a little bit of myofascial release, and then have them like redo that same movement. And people were like, think we were like magicians, like we just sprinkled, magic dust over them. And we're like, that's
really,
how.
Levers and pulleys of your body. That's it.
Yeah, we're like, right now, how you feel is how you're supposed to feel every time you do that. They're like, I've never felt this way, because of just knowing how to look at that. And again, like my understanding of that, especially now, would be like 3% of your understanding. But I think again, it's probably that much more complex. But clearly, you've mastered it. Where when you have these massive frames that are lifting tenfold of what you were taught in school, how to do that. And then, not to mention, we're all know-it-alls, all of us that lift, right? So
it's crazy to me. I talked to someone who, might be really, really smart in something like PEDs, and they think they're on the same level with me, like movement assessment, correctives, and things like that. And I'm like, bro, so I've literally put my body through the ringer. I didn't even talk about all the theater episodes and stuff that I went through, and trying to like figure out how to relearn to walk, and then get into bodybuilding, and then get back under the bar. It's been a road, and it's taken every bit of my clinical knowledge to get back to where I am right now. So every time someone's like, oh, like, read a thing, I think I understand, and then out talking, it's like, reading a book and living it and putting it to the test are very different arts. And I think that, that's probably one of the things that I look at the most with regards to iron sport athletes. I kind of joked about it. I forget what podcast was on a couple of weeks ago, but the interview asked, like, what's the biggest thing that iron sport athletes need to know, or clinicians who work with them or want to should know? I'm like, nothing in our body responds the way you think it should, and it's going to, the higher the level of the athlete. So I'll use Justin Harris as an example, just because again, he's talks about his back development, to where he'll say, like, I had a hard time developing my upper back when I was running. Great, let's take a look at it. And I wish we'd gotten this on film when we were at Elite last January. The first thing he does when he goes to grab his dumbbell is his shoulder moves like this. And so he starts to row, and the first thing that happens is anterior deltoid concentrically orients to eccentrically support.
Is this part of it right here? This image right here?
Yeah, I wish that was like a picture from the time we were together. The article is about something different, but actually looking and correcting that movement. I mean, you would think if he's rowing, there's no way he'd feel his front delt, right?
Right.
But because his body is so biased and so calibrated into that, we had to recalibrate it by first getting some proprioceptive input to the area we actually needed to move. And so it's interesting to me too, because I have so many athletes who you would think they hurt, and I think as corrective specialists, people want to look at all the things they can fix. If someone's not hurting, the last thing I'm going to do is point out all the things that's wrong with them. So, and I've been crucified by other therapists for that.
Well, and I think especially you're now an IFBB Pro, and so as far as the physique goes, you know how important that is if someone's trying to bring up a lagging body part. But I think there's a lot of value you can bring to that, because if someone's has, as the saying goes, like pro arms and pro legs, but they need to get their chest up or their lats up or whatever, right? Like, I would imagine there's maybe some degree of genetics and attachments, etc., but maybe it's also 10, 12, 15 years of how the mechanics for them work that just made those other muscles just continually so over dominant. Like, I could think of high school athletes I worked with. We in our town, it's a big football powerhouse, and I would work with them in the weight room, and they all wanted to lift like the football players, and I'm like, guys, the muscles you're using in the pool, like we need to like in the off season build strength in those muscles. That's fine, but we need to like work on your balancing you a little more, because they were their stroke and their movement pattern was so shortened because the the antagonist muscles were just so weak in that, and just holding back those prime movers or whatever. So you can explain it better than I can, but I could look at him and just clearly see his day that. But can you talk about maybe some of your approaches to that when someone has underdeveloped areas? And
I want to hang on that if that's okay, because
yeah,
especially
yeah.
when we're like endurance athletes. So before, I was training for a half Ironman at the same time as competing in powerlifting, and I was trying to use that to cut 4-figure show. It was really fun. It was a lot of work. It was awesome. Did not do the half Iron because I will not get into this life for me. But looking at that training and how to structure the microcycle across the week in class, the other thing it really gave me an appreciation for was, now in hindsight, and I again was talking about this with someone else, how plastic our body is. What I mean by plastic is how much things change, which sounds like duh. But if you look at like swimmers in particular, you're going to start to see changes in the rib cage, changes in how the shoulder blade sits, because it's on a rib cage shaped differently, and our shape changes so dramatically, especially at that age, and especially in a sport that's coupled with a respiratory demand. So a cyclist in aero has a way different respiratory demand and respiratory strategy than a swimmer who's breath holding and turning their head constantly, probably to one side, right?
Mm-hmm, yeah.
And those influences on the rib cage hang on, and again, they become our reference center and our calibration for our home base for how we go about the rest of our day. And so it's so fascinating to me when you look at these really, really high-level athletes, or even people just are more recreational about it, how our skeletal structure changes in adaptation to, I mean, we think about the muscles, right? We always think about, oh, it's an imbalance of muscles, but
that's a great point.
Our shape changes so much.
No, that's actually a really good point, because the terms I was using earlier was more, I did evolve my learning and more from others teaching me, to your point. Now that I'm thinking about it, I don't remember the specific example, but it was something to do with my hips, where they're like, well, actually, no, yeah, that's what it was. Yeah, it was my hamstrings. I'm like, they're too tight. Like, that was, layman's. And they're like, actually, they're fine. They're like, it's just more like something in my hips. Yeah, exactly. And because I was fortunate where one of the health clubs I managed was, they had a chiropractor there who was a really avid like Olympic lifter, and then the other physical therapist there was an Olympic lifting champion of some sort. She was one of the top female lifters actually in the country. It was phenomenal. Wow. Kind of different discipline, but similar to your story, it sounds like. So kind of understood the body of a lifter, and they're like, no, like I'm sitting here doing all this stuff from, like I said, the general population stuff I learned, and I did modify some things, but it was just eye opening to learn exactly what you said. So I think that's a great point about the bone structure changing and and so on. So can you talk a little more about that? Is there anything more that sticks out there that comes to mind, or examples?
I could go into a deep dive about that. I've been hung up on an idea called the infrasternal angle, ISA, as one of the assessments I look at in terms of, so right in the front where ribs come together, we have the cartilage on the bottom, right? And because cartilage has so much, it's not bone, it can change more freely. Our ISA tells me a lot about someone's inhalation, exhalation bias, and therefore their strategy, which again sounds super nerdy, and it is, but it really tells me how someone's going to stabilize something. And an ISA or an infrasternal angle tells me a lot about someone's stress state. I don't want to get hung up in breathing patterns from like the breathing pattern standpoint, because as soon as I start talking breathing, people think for some reason they associate it with yoga because of the breath work there. But the science of what happens in terms of the physiological changes with regards to gas exchange, autonomics from the sympathetic parasympathetic standpoint, how that shifts our brain. There's so much that happens from a neuromuscular standpoint. It very much has an influence on joint position and joint orientation. And joint orientation will almost always play a role in distal function, shoulders, hips, knees, things like that. So I've really been caught up on ISA because it's also going to be reflected in the infrapubic angle. And so if we look top down, we've got sternum and we've got pelvis.
Mm-hmm.
What happens in between there has to be our stabilization strategy. And you can think about that three-dimensionally from, front, back, side to side, and then also rotation. But we bias into these patterns, and usually where we're strong in that pattern is we're looking at load, and that tells me a lot about, where someone's going to allocate stress. So I look at those two things probably, I don't want to say first, but they tell me a lot.
Yeah.
And they change a lot. People kind of forget about, there's so much that happens biomechanically, and there's small degrees of motion, but they're very important degrees of motion, where the pelvis has to be able to, everyone thinks about anterior pelvic tilt, right? Like classic example. People associate anterior pelvic tilt with way back, back being really, really hyperextended. But the pelvis itself, like the pelvic bones, need to flex forward and extend back. They need to be able to flare in and flare out, and they need to be able to rotate, abduct, and adduct a little bit. So there's lots of degrees of rotation. As we even think about going down into descension of a squat, there's a change in the angle of those pelvic bones relative to each other. Probably way beyond the scope, but that's like a huge deep dive. But that influences the role of rotation that we need to be able to access to get into a deep squat.
Well, I think though, if I could comment on that, it's also like, it also, I think, and I know you're super busy and packed with people, but I think just in general, it's important to find good educational content on there. And maybe, well, not maybe, you're not going to know everything that Dani knows out there, right? For our listeners, but just to understand, like, well, I was going to say over the course of, a 20, 30, a lifestyle of lifting and training and trying to be healthy or try to accomplish great things, to pick up pieces along the way and work with professionals that can break some of that down for you. Like I said, I have, at the trainer level, probably 7 or 8 certifications and a degree in the field, but it's, you not only you have a PhD, but you have a lot of advanced experiences and things of that nature. And you're speaking at all these conferences for all these thought leaders in the industry on it. So I think there's still a huge level for me. So I just think of like general workout person who doesn't have the formal education I do, just how much value they can get from that. So I think it's important to know that, because you could oversimplify maybe what's going on. And it's definitely something like there are certain movements too, like you're more likely to lift or enjoy exercise if you can do the movements you like. And I know that's something that I've had, during different phases taken away from me. And it's frustrating, I'm sure, for a lot of people, to where they want to be able to run or they want to be able to squat or deadlift or whatever it is, but they just, because of all these things you're speaking of, they're so far off. But the good news is, if you're working with someone who knows what they're doing, and they can kind of reverse engineer it and help fix you and get you back to that movement pattern you need to be at.
And honestly, I keep things as simple as possible with my clients, just because I have some other tools to use or access. How important are they? For a majority of people, not really. I think the most important thing that I do as a coach and as a therapist, and again, like my clients come to me because they're like, I hurt, I don't want to hurt, I still want to train. Can we make these things work together?
Yeah.
Or I hurt, I don't want to hurt, and I say, great, what goals do you have? And they look at me like I'm crazy, and I'm like, do you want to squat 315? And they're like, I can't squat 225 without it hurting. I'm like, do you want to squat 315? And we go there. So I think that the most important thing that we can do as coaches for anything, whether it's nutrition, powerlifting, bodybuilding, or if you're, like a personal trainer working with people towards the goals that they give you, there's a level of trust there. The best thing we can do is educate. And the more just because we know a lot, or we have some very advanced things, and you can probably speak on this too, you have some very advanced ways of looking at a whole myriad of things about the whole human body. How often do you really need the super fancy ones?
Right. Well, I think it's actually a great point, and it's kind of a good transition. One thing I did want to put out there for the listeners to check out, I'm gonna load this up here, Dani, and I'll give an overview, and feel free to fill in any gaps that I missed. But just a lot of people say they're passionate about this and that, but really you're putting your money where your mouth is. You could see, there's a whole Team Troponin has a whole free YouTube content on there, so a bunch of great information for people to kind of pick up and learn from it. Some of it's, might be a little more, certain segments of it might be more on the bodybuilding nutrition side, but there's also some of your, you're a part of each one of those episodes as well. And then, Team Troponin, the website, there's some educational content, but then for a really, really inexpensive subscription, people can sign up here and just get access to tons of like member content and articles and training logs, all kinds of things, forums and whatnot. So I think that's really cool that you guys are out there. You're doing what you say you want to do and getting information out there. And I think that's pretty cool. Like, can you talk a little bit about just maybe filling in some of the gaps as far as A, your vision for some of these things you have going on, and B, just kind of some of the information you have on there?
Yeah, I think we really want to see Team Troponin grow a lot more. It happened really organically, which is cool. You can see my husband's down at the bottom. It's been really cool working with him because he's an engineer. He very much has that engineering, like very linear, logical approach to things, and that's not me. Have you taken the DISC, Joe?
I'm sorry?
The DISC personality test?
I don't recall. It sounds familiar, but I don't remember that. I did what is it? Myers-Briggs or whatever. I always hack that.
Oh, okay. I love these things because I love talking to people and understanding how to communicate with them and how they process. Dave is very much, so the DISC looks a lot at communication styles and value system. And Dave is this very like steady, very linear communicator, kind of like the steady based almost thing. I am very high on the decision making. Give me the data and I just want to go. And I think what's been really cool is the Team Troponin between, I'm a big nerd and Dave is very good at unpacking. He loves training. I love blending training and rehab. And Justin is just a wizard with everything related to nutrition. And I think that the whole part of this is we love what we do and we want a place to put it so that we can help those along the way and the way that we've been helped.
Right.
We really want to be doing more with that. I know long term, the goal is to create a site that also has its own mobile app, along with programs that you can kind of log within the app to have resources available for PT, for prehab. If you've got injuries like things like worms, you can try before your session, things like that. We're kind of in the early stages of it and have hit a few hiccups, but the vision is to kind of be the one-stop shop for everything related to training, nutrition, and training or PT.
Cool. Yeah, and I think just for listeners out there, can you, because there's so many areas there, and I'll tag on a few areas too that you'll be co-hosting with me on in a moment. But can you share just where people can find you for just following you and additional information? Just kind of give an overview of that, and I'll be sure to put that in the show notes as well. But
absolutely, you can find me on Instagram at Dani LaMartina DPT. My email is Dani@teamtroponin.com. And you can find me on YouTube on the Team Troponin YouTube. It's funny. I have not put a whole lot of content out because I'm so boots on the ground working with people that within there's actually a friend of mine who I spoke at a conference a couple weeks ago, and it was kind of for like the thought leaders within the industry. And it was a great experience, but maybe a separate point, I felt like I had totally dropped the ball in terms of speaking about what I wanted to speak about at the level and the depth at which I wanted to speak. And Alicia came and found me after, and she was like, really? And we talked a little bit about how as a female in this industry, you feel like you have to outperform your male counterparts. Like you have to operate at 100% if they're at 60. And it's true. And I think especially within what I do, like I'm working with dudes who are squatting 700 pounds.
right.
I better be at the top of my game.
Yeah. Well, you recently, I know you also, I mean, give yourself credit too, because you're traveling around doing seminars and things of that too, because you recently spoke at the Swiss conference. Is that right? And then you have another one coming up in February in Texas. I think February, is it the 18th?
Yes. And then I'll also
summer?
be speaking at an educational conference at Texas Tech in March and Memphis, probably January, February.
Cool. Well, and I think one of the things that you're super busy, but I do want to let our listeners out there know that I was able to, I guess, trick you into doing joining me on our first Detachment channel. So if you haven't had a chance to check that out, that'll be out there as well. This episode will be on my YouTube. And some of the content will also be in the First Detachment and Team Troponin channel. Just again, it's all about just getting the information out there. But I'm really excited because Dani's going to join myself and some guests. We have some many different experts coming in, but specifically some female hormone experts, female nutrition experts, female training experts, and then Dani's going to be one of those experts in a segment. But then I also coerced her or guilted her, or however you want to put it, into being my co-host, because I said it'll be a disaster without you. We need you, and she's like, "Okay, I'll do it." So definitely stay tuned.
Exactly how it went down.
Exactly, yeah. So. So definitely be sure to subscribe and follow all the channels we talked about today, because I think it's always going to be best working with someone directly and having the professional walk you through everything. But I still think you can get a lot out of just the educational content where you're putting out there, and then you're going to help me put out there and help the First Detachment team put out there as well. So thank you for that. I'm sure everyone's going to be really excited for that. But before we wind down, is there anything else in general you'd like to tell people about what you have going on or what's on the docket over the next 6 months or so? Or
I need to decide if I want to compete on the IFBB stage again next year. I really like to. So if I do that, follow along, because you can never have enough people in your corner when you're going through something like that. If you haven't done the prep. Oof.
Yeah, and your pro debut is last year, right? Did you do 2 pro shows, if I remember correctly?
I did 2. And I came in super conditioned, which was great. I did my job 90% of the way. I need to work in the presentation, which is a separate issue.
Sure. No, I appreciate that. There's so many facets to it that people just do not understand. It's the whole deal. So, well, no, I'm excited for you to see what this next season holds. Not only the educational season, but also the competitive one too, as you're getting out there doing your thing. But as we wind down, I was going to kind of walk through some rapid fire questions for you, and then we'll end with that if that works. So, all right, first question up. So you've accomplished a lot of great things in your sports. So I'll just say in competition, because usually I will narrow it down to one area, but you've competed in so many different things. So what accomplishment in competing has made you most proud?
I won a Positive Athlete Award at the meet.
Nice.
At Boss 2016.
It doesn't shock me. Nice. Anyone who can laugh at Justin and my humor, if you didn't see it, it's on Team Troponin. If anyone wants to check it out, is definitely going to win that type of award. All right, next up, what accomplishment outside of competing made you most proud?
Probably a collection of accomplishments. Probably a collection. I feel like I have a net effect of letting my people know, coaxing my people into wanting more for themselves.
Yeah. Good deal. All right. Next one, as far as I'll unpack this a couple different ways, but the first one will be, if you had to pick one word to describe like a physique competitor in general, what would that be?
Driven.
Okay. And then if you had to describe one word to describe a powerlifter, what would that be?
Stubborn.
Nice. All right. So I want to maybe a couple different ways I can take this question, but the first one is, if there was, one word or phrase of encouragement you had for a young female iron sport athlete, whether it be physique or strength training, that they're trying to kind of come up and do their thing, what would that be? What would be some words of wisdom, encouragement, or advice you would give?
You are capable of so much more than you can even fathom.
Good deal. All right, next question is, if you had to miss one between a night of sleep, a meal, or a training session, which one would it be?
Night of sleep.
Not missing food. Not missing food or the training, huh? Good stuff.
To be honest, I miss sleep often, so it's kind of like, that's a no. Let's just go with that.
Well, the next question is, I know you're really hard on yourself as far as you growing your business and your brand and getting things out there, but it is a success, but it doesn't mean that you're satisfied. I appreciate that. But I still want to ask if you had like one word that is maybe you would use as a parallel, or one phrase that like parallels between competing and business, what would that be?
Boots on the ground. For
Good
sure.
deal. Okay. All right. Next thing is, can you share your current passion? Like, what would you say is your thing that excites you the most? When you wake up tomorrow morning, what's that thing that excites you the most right now?
This is an interesting time for you to be asking me this, because I'm at this really weird crux with my business. I'm starting an online mentorship, which makes me very, very nervous because of this massive case of imposter syndrome, but also because I really I love to teach. I want people to feel equipped and empowered, and I get asked a lot of questions. So I was like, let's do this.
So can you explain more, just so people out there know what that means, or where they can find it as you're, yeah. I know you're building a framework of it right now, but right, if I understand correctly. So what exactly would that be, or who would be the person that would want to take advantage of this?
So kind of the whole premise of this is, it's hard for me to talk about myself out loud in a positive light. This is really hard for me. It's like a problem, actually. I am probably one of the very few, if not the only one that I know of, that has accomplished what I have in both sports with the clinical background. And I want to back up to a lot of the stuff that people are looking at now with like all the neuro and whatnot. I took a lot of those courses before I even started PT school. So I've kind of been hyper-focused for as long as I can remember. It's kind of who I am. And given I'm one of the only people that's really kind of done all these things and uses training, and like really hard training, I'm not talking like 1 3 by 10. Like I'll use a hack squat with a modification as the training to like use a hip issue. Let's work through this. How do we do that? And so kind of deconstructing some of the methods that I use, it's kind of a combination of histology, neurology, physiology is like a training, biomechanics, from the vantage point of both the clinician and the coach and athlete.
Awesome.
So yeah, putting through, I'm basically going to base it off of the talk that I gave at this conference a couple weeks ago, add some layers to it, buff it up a little bit so that it's a little bit more applicable, and break down that method.
Awesome. Well, I think, I know it's hard. I'm very similar, right? Like to acknowledge your accomplishments and things, but I think, right, like out there's a lot of people that haven't accomplished anything, but they're really good at boasting about themselves. So unfortunately, those who actually know what they're doing need to do it a little more, but it's usually the quiet ones, or the ones that are maybe more reserved, that don't do it. So I'm happy for you. I'm happy for you. Keep pushing it. Keep pushing it out there. Keep promoting yourself, because you have really great content and good things. So, but again, I know I want to be respectful of your time. So I really appreciate you coming on. And we mentioned all this, all the information will be in the show notes for the audience out there. But again, be sure to like, subscribe, turn on notifications, and comment, send your questions in. Look at what we have in there, because there's tons of ways you can follow Dani and just get more information from her. So thank you again so much. It's a pleasure having you on. And for everybody else out there, we'll see you.
Thanks so much, Joe.